Do you believe in life on other planets?
Oh yes, there's not much question at all. But there's life throughout the universe. We're not alone in the universe at all.
You're convinced that we're not alone in the universe?
Oh, I know for sure we're not alone in the universe. And I happen to be privileged enough to have been on the fact that we have been visited on this planet. And the UFO phenomenon is real, although it's been covered up by our governments for quite a long time. It is a real phenomenon. And there's quite a few of us. It's been well covered up by all of our governments for the last 60 years or so. But slowly it's leaked out, and some of us are privileged to have been briefed on some of it. But I've also been in military circles and intelligence circles that knows beneath the surface of what has been public knowledge. But yes, we have been visited. I've been deeply involved in certain committees.
Oh my goodness. What could that possibly be about? Sounds like a bunch of alien stuff to me. A little bit of conspiracy going on there.
Moon bases, Alex.
Moon bases. I want to talk about moon bases.
I love this stuff.
I want to go a little wild and out, you know? Some things, some serendipitous things happen in your life, and it's just like, I need to talk about it. It needs to be brought up. Do you know what a phenomenon is? Can I explain the definition of phenomenon?
Something like a phenomena.
Okay.
What is a phenomenon?
A phenomenon is an observable fact or event. So, he called Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the NASA astronaut from back in the day. He said that this UFO phenomenon is legit. Well, a phenomenon is an observable fact or event. So they have observed legitimate UFOs, right? There has been legitimate alien contact, which I think is a lot of fun. Outside of being like people thinking it's a conspiracy, I think it's a blast.
Yeah, no, but I mean, how many astronauts, because I know they even had, what's his name, Buzz, take a lie detector test. And
Lightyear?
Not Buzz Lightyear, Buzz Aldrin. And he came out and said, that there was aliens and that there was a moon base and all that. And they gave him a lie detector and he passed it. So, what's going on? Yeah, that's what I say. And all these, we just heard from another astronaut, all these astronauts are coming out stating that there is a UFO phenomenon happening and that they've experienced it, several times.
Do you know what's also another phenomena? Every time there's an astronaut that goes up into space, their consciousness changes.
Oh, yeah.
Their
all
perspective
talk about that.
on humanity, life in the universe changes completely. Once they leave the planet and observe it as a third party,
yes,
it's a completely different world. And I'm not saying that as a pun. It's a legitimately different world for them in their mind.
So let's start at the beginning with moon bases. And then we're going to, we'll kind of do some history, lay out some history, and then we're going to share some information that you've received with this. And then I want to kind of get a little bit more into with aliens. I think this will be exciting.
Moon base.
Did you know?
Sprechen Sie Deutsch.
So everybody knows they can go to nasa.gov/special/Artemis, which is the twin sister of Apollo. And you can see by 2024 we're going to the moon again. So I mean it's all over NASA's website. I don't know what the cost to go to the moon is exactly, but I imagine it's way more than, in the days of $400 hammers.
Yeah.
I wonder how much it actually cost us. But we have to understand that the Russians went first.
So, yeah, they're looking at right here. So it's $180,000 per mile multiplied by $1,000 would yield $180 million per head for the trip to the moon. So if you're looking at it, the cost is about $1 million per pound to go to the moon.
Yeah, so that gives you an idea.
So if I got the weight of the rocket, the weight of the fuel, the weight of the payload, the weight of the people, that's your cost.
But I mean, it's something that happened that was extraordinary in the sense of whenever you look at the ability to be able to get it off the ground safely. I mean, that's a liability. Get it from once you're getting it off the ground safely. Now you have to enter a different atmosphere. Then you have an asteroid belt. Then you have to land it on this moon. And then from there, you're hanging around doing stuff. And then you've got to launch off the moon. And then you've got to launch where you sync up with another vessel. So, I mean,
this is great. You know what I like about this? Why, if you're going up there, first of all, we strap ourselves to this huge bomb in the shape of a pencil, a sharpened pencil. Okay. And then we launch this thing up with the right, trajectory, trigonometry, pretty advanced. We put it into a microgravity environment, then no gravity, then back to microgravity, land the thing. But the real sweet sauce to this is majority of the fuel spent is just getting out of our atmosphere.
Right.
What a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Same thing with takeoff with planes. Majority of the fuel spent is when it's actually taking off, getting to elevation. But once it's gliding, it's extremely efficient up there in the sky. So when you got this giant bomb taking off, this rocket, carrying whatever type of vessel and payload, it's like burning through all this fuel. So the idea would be, if rocket technology is the best technology we have, which we know is obviously not true, it's just a public technology, that once you can bring that fuel to the moon, it only requires a little kick in space due to the lack of friction and microgravities. So you can actually be very efficient with your travel past that point. So if you continue to bring resources up there and fill that thing out, if you are still, burning an anaerobic process to create thrust, well, then it would make sense like, okay, we got to keep delivering more fuel up here and then build the base. And then from there, build a more reasonable launch program in that microgravity environment. Because it's going to be less of a waste for us. We'll also be more efficient with space travel once we're actually outside of Earth doing those launches.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So the real question is, what's the feasibility of building a moon base? Have people thought about it as a feasible thing? Is this just new to us right now?
What happens when you have a military moon base? Do you then can lay claim to the moon? Can you lay claim to space?
This is an interesting
Can
question.
you shoot, we have Star Wars and stuff, Ronald Reagan and all that.
Yeah.
Can we have the ability to be able to protect ourselves from the moon?
So you couldn't use lasers up there like people thought. Lasers require oxygen, like an atmosphere, to travel across. If you're thinking about a moon base and someone making claim to it, we went up there and we stuck a flag down.
Right. You can still see the flag today.
Does that mean you own that territory?
Old school days, it was that way. Like
old school
Antarctic
days. Yeah, look
stuff.
at the Antarctic, right? We're always trying to divide it up. You could probably think that if this moon's been there and it's a very nice point of observation,
right,
that if this phenomenon of craft, like Dr. Edgar Mitchell was talking about, is flying to this moon, it's a great jump point. It's almost like a little bit of a way station. You go to if you're on 40 over here in New Mexico, you stop at a Love's in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. You've done that several times.
That is what that would be akin to. So for us, we're like, well, how do we get off the Earth and start to lay claim to something else? And this is this stupid human idea we have that there are borders and there's ownership of land and planetary bodies.
Yeah, because we know it, especially like for instance in Antarctica, we know that's owned by an ancient civilization.
Yeah,
that's not owned by anybody. It's not owned by us.
We're
so. And then you look at, and we'll talk about this later, but you look at all these ancient aliens that had crashed. I mean, there's crash sites on the moon. There's crash sites on several planets. So it's like...
Well, people ask, obviously, they're advanced. How did they crash? So if you've done any research into some of the ideas around anti-gravitational technology, anti-grav, what happens is that, much like we have an ocean, you have a boat that is hopping up and down on the water. It's just like moving with the waves. The electromagnetic currents of the Earth that actually generate that gravity due to the Earth's size in its spin is creating almost those waves. It's not a perfectly flat thing. So if you watch extraterrestrial craft, legitimate videos, there's bounce to it because they're actually riding electromagnetic waves. So when you go to the poles where this stuff is coming out, actually in an implosion and regeneration function, okay?
And you can Google that.
Yeah,
and
I
see
mean,
the
that's
poles of any planet.
That's an obvious thing, right? Yeah. So if you're looking at those poles that are coming out, if you're flying a craft over there, and if you're not understanding of those specific poles of that planetary body, your guidance is going to be off. You're going to smash right into the ground. Think about if those poles curve in. You're essentially riding it flat on the ocean, but imagine if the ocean just went vertical on you.
Well, you also have to think of it this way. I mean, look how advanced we are with since Henry Ford. I mean, the technology, we have Tesla, which is a super advanced car, and stuff is still crashing.
All the time.
So, I mean...
People got to learn somehow. Even if you're advanced, you're still learning.
It's just that 20-year-old little male alien.
He stole his mom's ride. I got to go out here and check this planet out.
Yeah, exactly.
All of a sudden, the gravitational fields go vertical. Smashes into the Antarctic. We come across him, tens of thousands of years later, they're like, look how advanced they are, But it's got the old caddy badge on it, with the big wings on the back.
He's like, I wonder if aliens can like soup up their rides.
Yeah. Like, how do you throw a little bit of flavor on it? Oh my gosh.
I wonder if they have stuff like that. Like, I'm pretty sure they probably have crystals, different crystals they stick in there.
Yeah, make it look cool.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, for us, we always think about making stuff look cool. They're probably all about form and function.
Yes.
Yeah, but we're like, how do we make it look nice?
So let's. No, I love.
Where
this.
are we going?
So let's get into. I want to get into the 1959, and I want us to put ourselves back in that time frame. And NASA, there was a lot of pressure on the United States because you had the Cold War, and you got to think 1945 we're out of World War II. Russia and America pretty much won. Germany's defeated. And, other countries, all the other European countries are rebuilding. England's rebuilding. Everybody's rebuilding. And so, you have this ability for the United States and Russia to declare war on each other in kind of a maybe in a safe way.
Yeah.
So, you have the president, you have everybody being obsessed with this. It's funny because after the Apollo program was released and we did it a whole many times, in like 2 years, there was no the public was like, we're so over this. Because they'd done, 14 missions or something like that, I think. Mm-hmm. But there was this, in 1959, there was a project called Project Horizon.
Ooh.
And and this is all legit. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's like Project Paperclip. People don't realize this. That was legit.
Do you know how many?
And you know how many Russians and Americans both grabbed Nazi scientists?
Tons of them.
Yeah.
Tons of them. You want to know why? That's where all the brains were. All of our great models of physics and everything, that we stole that.
Because think of the amount of math. You'd mentioned this earlier, but think about the amount of math to get to the moon and do all those. Those are all calculations.
No thanks.
Yeah.
No thanks. You imagine a bunch of guys coming up, and they get like a thick German accent.
Yeah, yeah.
They're like, they are Nazis, but they're working at NASA, and they're like, we have an idea here for you.
And that
we
sounds...
have come on our graph paper, and we want... And the guy's like doing all the calculations. I'm like, I'm not strapping myself to a bomb with your little Nazi mathematics here and launching myself up to the moon,
It'll be perfect. You got the sync with... Yeah, you can imagine all that. So, no, but this is very important. So when people say Nazi moon bases, this is where they're getting it from, Project Horizon, because there was a lot of Nazis involved with this. So it was the U.S. Department of the Army, Department of the Navy, Department of the Air Force, and the U.S. Space Program. And in June 8 of 1959, a group at the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, they called it ABMA, produced a report titled Project Horizon, a U.S. Army study for the establishment of a lunar military outpost. So you can look all that up. It's all out there now. So here's what the proposal states. The lunar outpost is required to develop and protect potential United States interests on the moon, to develop techniques in moon-based surveillance, of course. Yep. Our military-industrial complex loves the word surveillance of the Earth and space in communications relay and in operations on the surface of the moon, to serve as a base for exploration of the moon, for further exploration into space, and for military operations on the moon if required, and to support scientific investigations of the moon.
Can I ask you something? What would be the point of being on the moon anyway? What military expedition do you need on the moon?
I think
you tell me that they have a threat you're worried about in the 50s on the moon?
I think it's this whole idea of male patriarchal authority. Like, so, I mean, it's 1959, so you got to figure this is the time that we're getting away from, we're getting into excess. I always think of the 50s and the 80s as being this time of like mass, masculine consumerism, Wolf of Wall Street stuff. Yeah. So, and this was the same time. I mean, this is Mad Men time.
Yeah.
So this is a bunch of guys smoking cigarettes, wearing really nice suits, Lyndon Johnson, all these motherfuckers.
Yep.
Sitting there, which he was like pure straight up. I have 3 big thick books on him. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But he was straight up ruthless.
And you're right about that patriarchal thing. The moon is a very feminine object.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's to conquer it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you sit here and you have these this, and the cost of this. So this is the government's projected cost. So you always got to take projective cost and then times it by 10 probably. Yeah. But it was the permanent outpost predicted to be required for national security, and they labeled it that it needed to be done as soon as possible to the cost of $6 billion.
So what year was this?
1959.
Okay.
And they wanted 12 soldiers.
1959.
Right. $6 billion.
$6 billion.
And we'll see how much this really cost.
Let's see what the fucking value is. Okay, this is insane. So the real value is 54,229,609,721. That's an inflation, cumulative inflation rate of 803.8%. Thank you, the United States government, for making our money worth nothing.
So they were going to have a base and then have 12 soldiers on it.
12?
Yes.
12 guys?
Yeah. And so, but you had President Dwight Eisenhower rejected it. And Dwight Eisenhower's whole idea was to remove America's space program when he transferred it from the military and put it in the civilian agency, NASA.
So NASA.
Because NASA is a civilian agency. People don't realize that. But this is really cool. Horizon was estimated to require 147 Saturn A1 rocket launches.
Those are big rockets.
Yeah.
They have a great place down here, the Museum of Nuclear History.
Yeah.
You can stand next to like a Saturn rocket. Those boosters are
huge.
Enormous.
Yeah, and so there was a lunar landing and return vehicle launched on a Saturn A2 would have shuttled up to 15 astronauts at a time to the base and back. This was in lieu of 12 million pound thrust super booster required to a direct ascent lunar flight, which could not possibly be developed in the time of 1966. So Werner von Braun, head of the ABMA.
Yeah, ABMA.
Yeah, and Heinz Hermann Kohl was in charge of the Saturn Development Project.
Another Nazi.
Yeah, so you have two Nazis. That's where we get the Nazi moon
Leading
base.
ABMA.
Yeah, Werner von Braun he eventually became in charge of NASA, right?
Well, not directly. They don't list him actually as a director. So von Braun, in case anyone knew, designed the V2 rocket for, Germany at the time.
Yeah.
And they were just launching these things over at England, just bombing the piss out of them. But then he's like, I can take this a step further. I want to go up into space. And then during Operation Paperclip, the Nazis are like, I'm just a scientist. And we're like, fine, we'll take you. You can come over here. You can live in these towns specific to where we design them. And then you're going to do research we tell you to work on. And then we, like the church, will absolve you of all your Nazi sins.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
We're like, you have an amazing mind.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll forget about you bombing England and doing all the technology that you...
Yeah, Holocaust stuff.
So this was interesting. So the construction in 1964, there was supposed to be 40 Saturn launches. Mm-hmm. And then by January 1965, there was a cargo delivery to the moon would begin. And then the first man landing by two men would be 1965.
It's not first human, first man.
Yeah, manned landing. And then outpost manned by task force 12 men was 1966. Now, the location is really important because...
So let's talk about the location of where they would land it.
Rocket vehicle energy requirements would have limited the location of the base to an area of 20 degrees latitude, longitude on the moon. And they don't give the reasons why, but they only have 3 certain areas that these Nazis could predicted that it would land.
Well, you got to think about it. So we're in tidal lock with the moon. Mm-hmm. It's not like, I'm going to land on the back. I'm going to land over here. If you're in tidal lock, like let's just try and land maybe off to the corner a little bit to slow our speed and then angle in.
Right.
You can't go right directly at it. You have to slope in.
So when was the first Apollo landing on the moon? The very first one. What year was it?
1960, right? First Apollo.
Here, now we're going to get into a conspiracy theory.
This is fun.
Because the 66 through 67 was supposed to be...
1969.
Yeah, it was supposed to be the first operational year of the lunar outpost. So and then there was 120 tons of useful cargo. So what people think, what a lot of people expect and think is that this program went through.
Yeah.
And so they knew that they could go to the moon because they experimented from 1964 to 1967 and that they've actually accomplished this. And some people believe because there's huge lava tubes, so it would be extremely safe up there.
Look at New Mexico.
Yeah.
We have lava tubes that you can walk through. They're enormous.
Well, that's where they use those for part of the bases here.
No, I know that. Why wouldn't you use a lava tube? It's free space already built underground. You just hang out in it. Structurally safe. Mm-hmm. We don't have anything crazy going, no earthquakes or anything.
Then they have that machine that can clean up the tubes.
Oh, yeah. It makes it into that molten crystallization. You get a nice smooth bored tube.
Yeah, especially with how easy would it be to remelt the lava?
I think about that all the time.
I know. Yeah, I do too.
I'm so tired of synthetic
I want to
sidewalks.
touch it.
Oh, yeah. That glass
That'd be
feeling.
so
Like
cool.
that obsidian glass feeling? All right, we're sidetracking. So what else were we...
So the base would be defended against Soviet overland attack by man-fired weapons. So you'd have unguided, they called this David Crockett rockets with low-yield nuclear warheads.
Yeah. Have you seen those things?
Yeah.
Those are mortar boys?
And then you had conventional Claymore mines And this is really, really cool. So this is really smart.
Could you imagine a claymore on the moon?
Well, that's what they were saying, that it would puncture pressure suits.
Yeah, I know. That's the whole thing. You don't want to shoot a laser at somebody. All you got to do is puncture the suit, and then they'll suffocate.
Yeah.
That's
They're
all
done.
you have to do. If you can shoot a projectile at a moderate speed,
A moderate speed,
that thing is going to keep on cooking because the speed that it accelerates at, that's a constant acceleration because of the microgravity environment.
Yeah, and so you like layouts and architecture?
Of course
Are
I
you
do.
ready for the layout of it?
Please
So
tell
it's
me-
got to be up there.
Please tell me it's
I'm almost
spherical.
positive
Please tell me
it's
it's
up there.
spherical. Please tell me it's spherical.
The basic building block for the outpost would be, they said would be, but it's cylindrical metal tanks, 10 feet in diameter and 20 feet in length.
Oh, so they're crap. Starts with a Q.
Is it like cigar shaped? Cylindrical?
No, yeah, it is.
Cylindrical?
But it's more like a Quonset hut.
Oh, yeah. That would make sense.
You know what a Quonset hut?
Well, they've
right?
had pictures of that on the moon where they've had pictures where it's been like Quonset hut looking items.
Quonset huts are genius because of their structural integrity.
There's one picture of the moon. There's one, just type in moon base pictures. There's one that you can clearly see. You can see the outline, like the light shining down. You know, if you're looking overhead and you see like, you see like if you're flying in a helicopter, you've flown in helicopters and planes.
Tons of them.
If when you look over and you see a street light and then it shines on the pavement,
Of course.
they have pictures like that.
Yeah, in the
That's
rim.
absolutely, in the rim. That's absolutely amazing. So
then now that we're talking about this operation, we got all these Nazis.
mhm.
We got all these governments going together on Ambra, right? All these government agencies. We're launching stuff up there. We're testing out the feasibility. And then you have this public spectacle that says, we're going through all this trouble to launch a lunar lander up there and put a flag in the ground. And this is in 1969. In 1941, the Germans had Der Glocken, which was chained down outside, which was an anti-gravity craft, and it used a heated mercury core that was pumped with this massive electrical charge to create an electromagnetic field that generated lift. They were doing that in 41.
Yes.
And so if you get all these Nazis, take them on over, and say that you want to build a moon base, doesn't seem that unfeasible.
No,
In
not at all.
1969, when the Apollo missions landed, what a great distraction.
That's what people are saying. Yeah.
Oh, let's give it to a public agency. Let's put it in the hands of the public. Let's make them feel like they're a part of it. And then be like, we're happy with taking small steps.
Yeah, because China and Russia say, that there's a moon base up there, and they've both also agreed that aliens are real. The Russian, I think it was one of the Russian prime ministers or something. I don't know.
They talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
They're not
the military. The guy that runs the military
yeah,
said that
he's not
they're-
opposed to it.
Yeah, he said that we have proof that there's aliens. So whenever I look at Russia and China, they have no, for them it's not. Russia purposely is going to give us disinformation, but to say that there's aliens or not aliens, they're how would you give misinformation on that?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, they're telling their own people that too.
Yeah.
So did you see? This is really cool. Quick side note.
Tell me.
They just found out the anti-vaxxers.
Sure.
They found out that on Twitter, all the anti-vaxxer stuff, they did research on it. There was only 12 accounts that were producing this millions and millions of anti-vaxxing
No
stuff.
way.
Yeah, and so I imagine, people don't realize there's this new cyber headquarters that Putin built that is millions and millions of dollars, and it has, you can look it up.
It's a new war.
And it has, it's a war for him, yeah.
Yeah, that is the new battlefield.
Because like when Ukraine fell, and this was just a few years back, he realized, this is what he realized. So in this cyber war thing, and he built it after the Ukraine thing, or was in the process of building it. But he came in and hacked all the banks in Ukraine and stole a shitload of money.
Why not?
Out of Ukraine, yeah. So in his idea, he's like, and China knows this too. So, the more, and they can be nefarious about it. We're in the United States. Are we nefarious?
If you know that the new battlefields are fought online, then, come on. If the entire financial system is put on the internet, that just tells you where you need to put your efforts.
Exactly. So let's get into, I want to get into the story of protecting, of course, people that you had talked to, but you had heard a story from a gentleman.
Yeah, 2 degrees of separation, right? And this is, there's a lot of cool stuff going on here, but we'll share this. So we know that the government hires a lot of contractors. Just go to Kirtland Air Force Base. They have an entrance just for contractors. Whether you work for Raytheon, Pitney Bowes, General Electric, Lockheed Martin, it doesn't matter, right? You're a contractor for the U.S. government. So you get to do special projects within it. Now, you were a United States Marine in the Air Division.
I was a contractor.
Yeah, you were a contractor for the United States Corporation, essentially.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm making a joke about it.
Yeah, you're doing a good job. So you knew that there was a problem with the air intake of the Blackhawks, correct? When you're flying them in the desert.
Yes.
Okay, so there is a gentleman, 2 degrees of separation from here, who designed those air intakes. Quite a genius engineer, frankly. Worked for GE. GE had the contract of reworking these air intakes because there was a problem with all the dust. Flying these in the desert, and we call these things that just like
in
clog
Somalia
out.
it was powder dust. So like all our hydraulic like struts and stuff, especially on the CH-46s, it would just eat through that powder dust when you would land. It would just eat through those seals, and then you'd just be squirting hydraulic fluid out of those.
And if you don't have hydraulic fluid, you have no pressure, and then you have no direction with your aircraft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so these intakes and stuff like that had to be redesigned, and you saw these redesigned intakes. So this gentleman at GE was called in for an immediate project because GE was the contractor for these Blackhawks up in Massachusetts. And they said, we need to get this thing redesigned. And so he had it solved overnight, and they had the parts shipped out to the Middle East and Somalia, or wherever the hell it was, in under 24 hours to get this thing fixed.
Which is legit because we would order these seals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we would do it party one. And we would get it less than 24 hours. And there was one time they had this one package of seals, and they had sent it through Italy, and it got there in 11 hours or whatever. But it was hand delivered from a plane.
It's amazing.
It costs way more to do all that than actually what the seals cost. So
absolutely.
this is absolutely true.
So this is how this works. Now, because this one individual, quite genius engineer, did a fantastic job. Okay. He was commissioned for another project with General Electric. So General Electric has 2 buildings in Boston, Massachusetts. One is their main office building, which everybody knows is GE.
Mm-hmm.
And then next to it is another GE building that is unmarked, and it has 11 to 12 feet thick concrete walls. The whole building. You know how heavy that is? Sitting right there, up in Boston. That is heavy to put next to the water.
Think about how much... it's not just heavy, but how the vibrational density.
The density of it.
Because you said concrete it absorbs.
It absorbs energy. That's correct. Any radio signals, anything can't get in or out. There's a reason why you have that thickness. It's not because someone's going to put a bomb at it.
Right.
It's to prevent those signals from going out. So if you're doing electrical testing or stuff on the inside, you want to make sure those signals don't leak. Now, GE, and this is the year 1992, had, typical badges for getting in, especially if you had certain clearances. You're like, oh, I got, whatever. It's got your GE badge thing. It's got your little SIM card thing on it. You know what it is, the military card. But if you were moving into the other building for the special projects through this contracting program, you got a black badge. And this black badge would denote your level of clearance to allow you to move through certain, walkways. So the higher-ups in GE come over to this guy, and they say, hey, we'd like you to work on a special project for us. He said, sure. And they're like, great. They're like, you'll be working on this project completely alone. No one's allowed to know about it. He said, okay, fine.
And Bob Lazar talks about this idea of
Departmentalization.
Yes. And explain that so people understand that before we get into the rest of your story.
So if you give someone a certain amount of information on a project, okay, depending on their level of clearance, you don't want to give them everything. You only want to give them enough that they need to complete the task.
Yes.
And not even knowing what that device or task is for until somebody else on the outside gets to piece all those things together and say, oh, this is the entire project.
Yeah, and so they experienced this with Roswell when they had to take different parts of the aircraft and these alien bodies and stuff like that, and they disseminated it all throughout different, no one would have full access to, one spacecraft or one, all the alien bodies.
That's precisely correct.
No one could put the puzzle pieces together.
No, you get and then breaking that up also decreases your risk.
Yes.
It's a very decentralized structure, and it's very intelligent.
So GE's doing this.
So GE's doing this. They're very well endowed with getting paid through whatever sort of budget at the time. So he's like, okay, I'll do that. So they walk him immediately over from the main GE offices over into this building by himself, him and 2 other people. They walk him into a room and they hand him a flyer and they close the door. And they say, what we need you to do is to make sure that this is engineered accurately because we have a presentation to a specific group of people about this subject.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes and looks at this flyer in this room, and it's a picture of a moon base. And they want to make sure that there's properly engineered feasibility so that when they go to talk about during the presentation, there's no sort of like logical holes in it. That there's actually a very good probability of doing and completing this engineering task properly. And this is in 1992. And it wasn't specifically said whether or not this was an enhancement upon a previous base or one that they were thinking about doing. It was just to go back and talk to these people about it. So,
But see, this is because 2024 we have Artemis where we're going back to the moon. So this makes me think: is this another little public ploy?
Little 1969 thing going on
to
here?
continue this moon-based work,
Right.
that you're seeing. So he's handed this flyer.
Yeah, so this is fantastic. Now, he and other contractors, they do work together, but they have certain knowledge that is split. And he has a very good friend he's been working with who's worked separate from him outside of GE, but he worked at Area 51 in Nevada and also worked at the island down in the Bahamas for the U.S. Navy for doing their research.
Right.
This is nuts. So...
And the reason they're in the Bahamas is the bases are strategically located for flight path. Oh, well, you're going to get into that.
Yeah, so I'm going to get into this in a second. Okay, so these two are having a conversation recently, during the coronavirus time, these two friends. And he goes to the one individual, and he says, the GE guy is like, I got to go get my coronavirus shot. And the guy's like, oh, wow, that's interesting. He said, are you going to go get yours? The gentleman who's worked at both of these bases as a contractor, Area 51 in Nevada and in the Bahamas. So he says no. And the guy goes, why? And he says, when I first got this job over here at Groom Lake, I was vaccinated 12 shots on each of my arms. He said, I have no bad cholesterol, any sort of bacteria or viral organism that can possibly touch my body and infect me or make me ill. He says, what are you talking about? He said, consider, for instance, because they can't really share what they're doing, but he said, consider, for instance, you're working with an organism that's not from here. You wouldn't want to give it an earthly disease, would you? That would be a problem.
Right.
Or vice versa, you wouldn't want to receive a disease from this organism. So he says, I can't get sick. He said, not only is the fact that we may be working with specific organisms over here at Groom Lake, but one of our major focuses is time travel. So if I bring a certain disease back to a certain time or forward in time, that could be an issue.
Yes.
Oh, this is getting quite interesting, right? So he said, that's what I was doing in Groom Lake. And he said, this is why I don't need my COVID shot, because I'm vaccinated against everything that could ever possibly be. I can't get sick. I don't have bad cholesterol, none of those things. He said, but also, aside from the time travel we do over in this area of the United States, over on the East Coast, we do a lot of studying of underground extraterrestrial craft. So this phenomenon that Dr. Edgar Mitchell was talking about is happening underground. He said, not only do we have our own runways underground, essentially, for craft to land underneath the ocean, he said a majority of extraterrestrial craft sightings by the United States government actually happen underwater.
And we know this, and this is verified off the San Diego coast because of who was the captain, which is really high up in the Navy, the one Tic Tac was it Tic Tac? I think that's what it was.
That might have been his name.
So let's get his name. Just type in Tic Tac UFO. It was Commander, I think. So, and then several of his pilots verified this. This guy has been, spent 30 plus years in the military, extraordinary.
Why can't I get this guy's name?
Is it?
Ex-Navy Admiral. What the heck's his name? Come on. Commander David.
Navy pilot Chad Underwood.
Yeah, Chad Underwood and Commander David Fravor. So this is off the coast of California. Commander David Fravor said the aircraft jamming the radar was an act of war. So they're looking at this Tic Tac thing flying around. But the thing is,
but it went into the water.
Goes into the water.
Right. So let's continue.
So let's consider that's in a logical fashion here, right? So if you fly airplanes normally right now, you're taught that the same physical mechanics of physics that happen underneath the ocean are the same ones that are abided by when I'm flying around a plane in the atmosphere. It's just almost a thinner medium of water. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You're breathing moisture, right? And that's what I'm flying through in my airplane. So those same three-dimensional spherical mechanics are happening here. So if you think about an extraterrestrial craft emitting some sort of field that's anti-gravitational, creating its own, I guess, atmosphere in a sense, there's no reason why it can't be up in the sky and be in the water. So if you want to remain hidden, and you don't want to be up in the sky where there's a high likelihood of being seen, right? Why don't we just go into the ocean and hang out down there? It's albeit just another atmosphere you're traveling through. Makes a lot of sense. So when we're considering these things and we begin to piece these together, right? You hear about the story of this gentleman at GE doing the moon base. You hear about time travel, extraterrestrials, underground extraterrestrial craft, people building this stuff out. This technology, that was in 1990. And then 1960s, you had people, working on this Ambra projects to actually build these bases on the moon. And then before that, the Nazis had ideas about it with the Glocken. It's like everybody's been pushing these ideas, but then there are certain nuances and divisions that say, hey, we've been working on this, we've been working on that, which only would logically tell you that because this is such a legitimate focus, that there must be some sort of technology that actually physically sits outside of what we currently understand in the public. And when you ask the question, this also upsets people, is the fact that why is it that I can't get these shots that this guy has?
Yeah.
I don't want to get sick. Well, imagine if you went around and you vaccinated all of us here on the world and we continue to make all these bad decisions. You've extended the lifespan of all of us to its maximum, and we continue to make bad decisions through a maximum higher probability for a longer length of time. That would be a bad idea. So until we get our heads straight and we evolve in our consciousness, it wouldn't make sense to just make everyone disease-free.
Yeah, I mean, from that crash of Roswell all the way through, every time we get alien technology and we reverse engineer it, we're always using it for the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
So why would, people always say, well, the aliens, they're not, why would they try to offer us anything?
Why would they want to offer?
Because we just want to take it. We're going to fight over it. What government gets it. And then, the Nazis happen to get it. That's, in the 1940s, you're not inventing something that you can chain down like that. Unless that's alien technology.
They're like, can we throw a chain on it? That'll hold it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that stuff just not, how is that stuff just created out of the blue?
Yeah.
It's not.
No. And there was another general in the naval, not general, admiral in the not the admiral of the Navy. I forget what the hell that naval position's called, who was in the Naval Research Laboratories. And they said that when we were creating anti-gravitational craft, we were like, well, what shape do we use first? And it's funny that you say tic-tac. Because their consideration was, well, why don't we just use a submarine? Things freaking sealed tight. Wouldn't that make sense to launch that type of thing up into space first? Sure. It's so strongly built. There's no leaks in it. I mean, that's the type of thing you want to be using. And weight at that point does not matter if you can create, an anti-gravitational environment.
Right.
It doesn't matter how heavy it is. Like when we think aircraft grade aluminum, lightweight, you have to travel far. It's kind of like this thin piece of paper flying through the sky. In the other cases, is like, no, I want something robust. So he said, the first steps that the Navy had taken towards something like this was to say, hey, why don't we just put anti-gravity technology inside our submarines and lift those things up. That makes a lot of sense. And the Navy's been, even think about the Philadelphia experiment, that they did down at the harbor in Philly. They used Tesla's technology to see if they can get this thing to phase out because of a high voltage they were pumping through the ship. Okay, so if you can phase ships out, dimensionally phase them, in I don't even know what year that was. I don't see any reason why they couldn't even come to the conclusion that, hey, how do we lift a giant submarine out of the water? Yeah,
but this base that you're talking about is in the Caribbean. You're getting into that. There's a lot of underwater alien bases in that. There's a reason why we have a base in the Antarctic. There's a reason why we have a base in the Bahamas. There's a reason why we have a base in Utah.
And now we have
places. One in Colorado. Yeah. Yeah, it's not.
Do you think we just randomly chose to put it on the moon? There's a great saying. Good artists paint, great artists steal. So if you find some sort of information that tells you this is probably a good place to hang out, that's probably where you're going to be. Yeah, it's not just like let's drop a pin on the moon or a pin on the map and decide that's where it's going to be.
And all this stuff, have you heard of SETI, SETI?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the NASA-funded study for...
My uncle is one of the lead scientists over there.
Yeah, it's for intelligent extraterrestrial life.
Yeah, search
so,
for extraterrestrial
and you can
intelligence.
look it up. This is, like I'm saying, this stuff is not conspiracy theories. They're looking for these techno-signatures of advanced alien civilizations. So whenever we look at whether we're on the dark side, the far side of the moon, we're putting a permanent radio telescope, to try to gain signals, or whether we're looking at, moving out from this planet. There's this big, we're seeing Elon Musk wanting to go to Mars. There's a reason why are all these billionaires and the global elite wanting to venture out of Earth?
I think there's two reasons. I don't think it's one. The first reason is we have this idea that we need to own and conquer in a military aspect. The second one, and that's a continuation of hierarchy. And I think the second one is people that are well endowed in the real history of what it means to be a human being are interested to see where our origins actually lie. So I think there's actually two paths that are taken here. One is interested in our historical origin of what it means to be a human being, and the other one is, I just care about conquest. So almost also like one is for love, one is for control. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where you have these individuals, the ones who have the wherewithal, or the companies, or whatever it might be, groups that have that wherewithal, are trying to do those things for one of those two purposes.
Yeah, and whenever you look at like the closest star to the sun right now, Proxima Centauri, is over 4.2 light years distant, but roughly every 100,000 years a star comes within nearly a light year from the sun. And so there have been tens of thousands of opportunities for technologies similar to ours to have launched probes into solar systems. So if you think of ancient aliens and a long time ago, and they're launching these probes out, and then what happens with these artifacts? Like we just had one coming out, and that Harvard scientist just said that one, we had talked about it before. I think it has a Hawaiian name, the cigar cylinder shape. He said that's extraterrestrial.
Yeah, you said that was extraterrestrial. And what about the flight one that just happened here in Northeast New Mexico?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah,
it's going over the FAA, radio that's saying, I don't really want to say it, but
yeah. And so whenever you have these artifacts and they get captured by solar system bodies, and then they become to be put into stable orbits, now you have the potential for them to crash.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that possibly the moon was put into a stable orbit? Are you telling me that it's a possibility that the moon doesn't have that much mass and it could be hollow? That in and of itself is a vehicle?
Yeah, there's a whole conspiracy theories on that.
Well, if you consider the physics of the moon and tidal locking, it's bullshit. Right? If you think about the objects, right, with spin, have you ever how do I explain this? You ever been on those things in a park? And it's got the bars that kind of tee out and like drop, and you're holding onto it and you feel like yourself getting yanked out. So imagine if you have two objects, right? The moon spinning around the earth, and one has a gravitational pull. Depending on the spin and the speed will determine if that thing is moving further away or moving closer. Why is it the moon is in a gravitational lock? That doesn't make any sense. The mass is not correct with that. If you look at all the other planetary bodies, like moons or satellites that surround these planets, their distance relative to that planet is changing, because that's what physics says. But if you look at our moon, it's not doing that. It's not doing that at all. It makes no damn sense why it's doing that. It actually goes against the laws of physics, very obvious laws. So what that tells me is that something must be controlling that gravitational lock. The lack of change in the speed of that spin. If you look at a figure skater, if they have their arms out wide in a spin, they're at a pace. But what happens when they bring them in closer? That pace increases.
Yes.
So why is it that the moon, which should be being pulled in by the gravity of the earth, why is that not also increasing in speed? That tidal lock should not exist. That moon should actually be spinning faster as it gets closer. But it's not. The hell's going on here?
the Nazi mathematician knew. So, whenever we look at and maybe you could pull this up. This is really interesting. They'll have a picture of this. So there's no wind or anything like that on the moon. So they just had a new they had some new high definition photography, and they actually saw where we put the flag at and where we drove around and all that. Our footprints is still up there and everything else.
As it should.
It just preserves.
There shouldn't be an atmosphere.
But this new satellite found a new set of footprints. And just type in new footprints on the moon, and it's not footprints like ours, but you can definitely tell that they're footprints.
Bombshell bizarre footprints on moon.
Yeah, look at them. You can see they're kind of like this too.
Like they snake?
Yeah, almost like, but they're footprints, but they're really large.
I would love a picture if a picture would show up.
A picture will show up. There's pictures of it everywhere.
Somebody's been here.
Mm-hmm.
Bizarre footprints across moon baffled NASA scientists. Oh, I see what you're saying. Those steps.
Yeah, can you see them? Like they're like
They
this.
said they're really,
and they're like this, you know. So it's like
really big footprints.
Yeah.
They look. That's just really, really big.
Well, where did those come from?
It looks like a machine or something was dragged across. Or if it lacks atmosphere, something slow came down and like hit and kept bouncing across the moon's surface. But listen, if you're so advanced, you don't leave a trace. You know how you go into a national park and it has that leave no trace thing, pick your trash up? Do you think if these extraterrestrials were respecting enough, they wouldn't leave that trail? Right? You wouldn't leave just like open evidence like that to say,
Right.
oh, hey, I was here making a mess. So I like to think about it logically to the end, and some of these things are albeit illogical, and other things are just that seems albeit quite probable.
Yeah, and I want to close this out. There was published in the specialized journal Acta Astronautica, and it was a study in what NASA's mission is going to be doing, you know, looking for proof of extraterrestrial life. And so let's go through these. Mission number 1 would be to search for crash sites on the moon, Mars, Mercury, and Sirius. So they want to look for evidence of impacts, existing artifacts, something that may have been, you know, preserved, because all these, you know, old planets is preserved for millions and billions of years. So we could scan the moon, we can scan Mars, we can scan Mercury, Sirius with these ultra high resolution satellites. So that's number 1. Number 2 is to look for pollution using Earth as a template, which makes sense. I mean, if you could find nitrogen dioxide, you know, that's a byproduct of combustion or nuclear technology.
Mm-hmm.
And then number 3 would be search for Dyson spheres, which I had to look this up. I didn't know what
The hell is a Dyson sphere?
A so-called waste heat missions to pick up. You can look it up. It's really cool. A so-called waste heat mission to pick up technological waste heat would require an all-sky survey using a space telescope with sensitivity at many infrared bands.
Hypothetical megastructure that completely encompasses a star and captures a percentage of the power output. This concept is a thought experiment that attempts to explain how a spacefaring civilization would meet its energy requirements once those requirements exceed what can be generated from the whole planet's resources. So what they're saying is that this Dyson sphere is, we are now going to trap and absorb the energy emitted from a star rather than us just producing it from the planet itself.
Yeah, it's not a big vacuum from Dyson.
Yeah, it's not a giant vacuum.
Number 4, which we talked about, would build a radio telescope on the moon's far side, which would be really cool. And it would be free of contamination from human radio emissions. So it'd be super sensitive searching. Mission number 5 would be to look for lurkers on asteroids.
Lurker.
Aliens concealed on resource-rich near-Earth objects. They're called NEOs, near-Earth objects. Possibly even asteroids that orbit the sun with Earth.
So aliens want to hang out on asteroids?
Well, I mean, the natural resources that are on one asteroid, you know, that's the whole idea. You know, if we could grab all the...
If you're that advanced to be flying around...
I mean, isn't there like tons of gold on an asteroid or something like that?
But let me ask you something. If you're that advanced to be flying around, why wouldn't you just synthesize something?
Yeah, exactly.
If you can fly around
with thought. Yeah.
If you can fly around with that, you know, an anti-grav, well, then you can manipulate electrons in the material sphere. There's no reason for you to be digging into stuff. What a stupid comment.
Yeah. And then mission number 6 is to intercept missions to interstellar interlopers or loppers. I don't know what that is.
I don't know what the hell an interloper is.
Yeah. And then number 7 is search existing data. Which Tartle could help in that.
Yeah, we get a plenty of data. I want to do a data packet on Tartle that says, "Have you seen a UFO?"
Yeah, there we go.
I would love to poll the entire world.
Do you have
any pictures?
Yeah.
We'll buy them from you.
And we encourage everyone as our sponsor to sign up for Tartle.co, get paid for your data.
Thank you very much.
And then number 7 is with search existing data. Number 8 is conduct all sky laser searches. Short laser pulses could be searched for invisible light and in wide regions of the infrared with a single instrument.
So what they're saying is if something is cloaked essentially in the sky and you send a laser out there, it'll break early before the definitive, height of our atmosphere is there for the length that laser can travel or be bounced back. So if you shoot a bunch of them out there, it can actually give you an image, a relative image of something that may be blocking that laser beam from moving through it.
Yeah, and then mission number 9 was study small asteroids. Asteroids under 10 meters in diameter may be artificial, but were never looked. Anything with very flat metallic surfaces will, with high reflective, polarized, reflect light. So whenever you look at that, and that's what this cigar-shaped thing that they found.
Always reflective.
It's highly reflective, yeah. So that's important for us to study those. And I got this article that we just talked about from Forbes.
That was on Forbes?
Yeah, Jamie Carter. And I love how he signs off on the article. Jamie Carter was a guy, he's an experienced science technology stargazer. He signs off the article like this: wishing you clear skies and wide eyes.
I like that.
Don't you like that?
Yeah.
Wishing you clear skies and wide eyes.
It's not just
wide eyes.
It's not what you look at, it's what you see, right?
Yes, yeah. So I want to close out in this, Alex, if you could share, whenever we look at the book that you just got done reading today, or we look at Ra's teachings, and we see a lot of channeling, and in this channeling, these are extraterrestrial beings. Our social, Ra calls them
social memory complex.
Social memory complexes. Why is it so important for like our listeners, higher density living listeners, and people that are open minded to even have a concern for extraterrestrials?
You should have a concern for it because you should take it as a learning stimulus. It should open your perspective and your interconnectedness with this universe itself. There's something great to be learned about unity from these individuals. And remember that if there is a craft in the sky and they are really, truly that advanced, they're showing themselves for a reason. It's not by mistake. They're not making small-minded mistakes.
No, because even in Star Trek, we have cloaking devices.
I know, and that's Star Trek.
Yeah.
So when you look at this material, look at it with a critical eye. If someone calls himself a channel, look at it critically. Test it against creational laws, test it against nature. And if it doesn't really align with it deeply all the way to the end, the largest parts of whatever this information is, or the smallest parts, or even if you see something visually, if it aligns or it does not align, well, then don't pay attention to it. But if it does, look for what is to be learned. Look for how it made you feel, how it was a catalyst for certain types of thought, how your perspective changed minutes after you saw or read that specific thing. That's what's so important about it. Don't refute it and say that's not possible, because doing that is an illogical way to think. Most things are improbable, but albeit possible. So keep that mindset. Look for unity. Look for things that live in that balance. Expand your understanding and your fine feeling of love, and share that with all creatures of creation. Do not just limit it to this material sphere and what you're being told.